email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Joining me on the podcast today is Jim Sanduski. Jim is a longtime consumer electronics industry veteran with over 30 years of experience in business-to-consumer marketing, sales, product strategy, and finance. In 2017, Jim was appointed president of the newly formed Sharp Home Electronics Company of America, which brought together the divisions of Sharp Manufacturing Company of America, Sharp Electronics Marketing Company of America, and Services and Solutions Group. In this capacity, Jim oversees Sharp's home appliance manufacturing facility in Memphis, Tennessee, Sharp's U.S. sales and marketing operations in Montvale, New Jersey, and Sharp's national customer and dealer service operations. Prior to joining Sharp in 2011, Jim held leadership positions in sales and marketing at Panasonic, HP, Samsung, and Sony Electronics, as well as financial positions at General Electric. He holds a BSBA from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Jim, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Thanks. My pleasure, Clint.
So I like to think about the people that come on the podcast as superheroes. We know that all superheroes have a backstory. So kind of give us some background on, your upbringing, where you came from, and kind of what got you to where you are today.
Sure. So, as you said in your intro there, I graduated from University of Nebraska. And so I'm from Nebraska, grew up in Omaha. And I've been out east, though, in the New York, New Jersey area, actually more years than I actually was in Nebraska. I guess 21, 22 years in Nebraska. But how I ended up east is really kind of an interesting backstory, which is that, I started, I went to, at high school, I was involved in something which is called Toastmasters. And I placed well in that competition. It was a year-long competition, and I placed well. And one of the prizes, so to speak, was a 3-week travel ship to Shizuoka, Japan. And what was special about Shizuoka, Japan is it was the sister city of Omaha. So I had the opportunity to go there. It was, here I was coming from Nebraska. Really had never been, it was only my second time on an airplane. And flew to Japan along with another high school student, the two of us, and we spent time with host families. It was just such a fascinating experience. Life was just so different there versus what I knew, growing up in Nebraska. And so when I entered the University of Nebraska, I found out that they had an exchange program with the Japanese university. And so after my junior year, I went over to Nanzan University in Nagoya, Japan, which is kind of midway between Tokyo and Osaka. Lived with a wonderful host family, and was there really there to learn the language and the culture. And after 1 year, it was a 1-year program, but I wasn't as far along in my Japanese as I had hoped to be. So I stayed a second year, and that kind of cemented, my understanding of Japanese culture and language. And so coming out of Nebraska, out of the University of Nebraska, I was interested in international business. And it just so happened that General Electric, which was the first company I worked with out, graduating, had a position in international operations and finance available in New York City. And so that began my journey out east. And I was with GE for 4 years in their international operations, which were primarily Europe and Middle East-based financial reporting, but really wanted to get into the area of marketing. And so in order to do that, once you're in GE, you're kind of typecast in terms of a finance person or a marketing person. So I used business school to kind of make that stepping stone to get into marketing. And so coming out of Harvard, had an opportunity to join Sony Electronics, and so this was in the late 1980s, 1989 to be exact. And it was when Sony was really at its zenith in terms of reputation in the CE industry, and just learned a tremendous amount about marketing the Sony way. And I was in the 8mm camcorder area. It was one of the many kind of format wars that I've been involved in my career. And, as you said at the outset, 5 years at Sony, 12 years at Samsung, 3 years at HP, 2 years at Panasonic, and now 11 years and counting at Sharp. And it's all been kind of in the Northeast area. short of the couple of years I was with HP, which was out in California, and then also in Europe.
Yeah, we were chatting offline before the show started, and I was telling you that Japan is one of my favorite countries. So what did you like about Japan that made you want to, I know you said you wanted to get better at the language, but what about it really appealed to you?
Well, for me, it was just how things are almost so completely different than in the U.S. Just getting the interesting perspective, a different perspective than we have here in the United States. And in Japan, they say that it's hard for foreigners to be truly accepted. But I felt that I was able to kind of break through that when I was there because I took the time to learn the language. And so because of that, I really felt like an accepted member of the society when I was there because I could speak the language. I knew the customs, the culture, and just being accepted in another culture that is so completely different than the American culture was something that just really appealed to me.
Yeah, I always enjoyed my time whenever I could go to Japan. I've always enjoyed it. The fact that you can set your watch by the train schedule, and I like the fact that I do project management in my day job, and following rules is kind of important, and they follow the rules there. And it's funny, unless you're in the subway in the middle of Tokyo during rush hour, you don't even realize how many people are in the city. It's massive. I think it's 40 million people in the city of Tokyo. So
yeah, I mean, actually, the population is about between 1/2 and 1/3 the United States, but the land mass area is the size of California, and most of Japan is actually mountainous and uninhabitable. So it is a very crowded society, but that's where everybody gets along. I mean, the consensus. It's a consensus-driven society, and people obey. You talked about, everyone obeys things lawfully.
Yeah. I can go on Japan for a long time, but I'll keep going. So, as I said earlier, I've spent some time there as well and discovered that language can be a barrier. You and I were chatting offline about how you interpret things visually from body language may not be the way that it really comes across. So did you find that to be the case? And how does that influence the different cultures working internationally?
So, we were talking again offline where, you hear the word hi, hi, as you're talking, and really you think that that's yes, that they're agreeing with you, but actually it's more about, I heard you. Doesn't necessarily mean that, that they're agreeing with what you're saying, but it's again, by living there, learning the language, you understand those cultural differences.
And did you find that you've worked in many international companies? So did you find that the culture to be different within each regional difference, or even within Japan? If you worked in multiple places, was it different?
Yeah. So actually, in my career, I've worked for, one American company being GE. I've worked for 3 Japanese companies being Sony, Panasonic, and Sharp, and then one Korean company being Samsung. And, between U.S., Korean, and Japanese company cultures, yes, they're all very different. But even, your readers or your listeners might be interested to know that there's even significant cultural differences within the Japanese companies. So, Sony, again, back in the day in the early 90s when I worked for them, was a very westernized company in terms of being very kind of market driven. Panasonic, I will say, is probably the most traditional Japanese company that I've worked for, where a lot of the decision making, was coming either from corporate headquarters in Japan, or it was coming from Japanese staff, which was, expats who were in the United States. And then I take a company that I'm with today, which is Sharp, which is probably the most family-oriented type of culture that I've experienced, and particularly with the group that I'm in, which is the consumer side of the business, because the consumer business in the U.S. is so different than the consumer business in Japan. I'm given a lot of authority and autonomy to kind of manage my team and the types of products that we bring to the U.S. market. It's really just given that autonomy to make those calls. So even a lot of cultural differences, even among Japanese companies.
I want to go back. I listened to one of the other interviews you did a while back, and I was struck by the fact that right out of college, your first job, you actually challenged yourself to step outside of your comfort zone. And I thought that was a good lesson for people to kind of hear. Can you tell us about that, where you took a job and then changed your mind and said, no, I need to challenge myself and go do something that's outside of my comfort zone?
Yeah. So, I was, when I joined GE, I joined in their financial management program, and it was a 2-year rotational assignment. Every 6 months, you had different work that you did within the different departments. And upon graduating from that, I joined the corporate audit staff, which was a very intense process where literally you lived out of a suitcase. You went to a work facility, whether it be, for example, Major Appliances at the time, which was in Louisville, Kentucky, and you would literally spend 3 months there living out of a suitcase in a rental apartment with other corporate auditors. And you were working from 8 o'clock to 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, as many as 6 days a week. And it was just a very intense process. Learned a lot. The exposure to all the different business units was tremendous. But for me, it was something that I determined during that process that, I want to be more kind of customer facing, whereas internal auditing, as you can imagine, is very internal focused. And so that was where I left the audit staff. I went back to the New York office, the New York GE office that I was at, but really kind of used that step to really look at business school to make that switch more towards a marketing role.
I think even out of high school, though, you took a job at one of the Bell companies and then changed your mind and said, no, if I recall.
Yeah. So that story, that's it's seminal for me, where, coming out of college, I had two job opportunities. One was with GE in New York City, and the other one was kind of the safe choice, which was Northwestern Bell, one of the baby Bell companies at the time. And, I grew up in Omaha. The job was in Omaha. And so it was the safe choice. And, I did choose the Northwestern Bell role, but I didn't sleep. After communicating that I would take the job and communicating to GE that I was going to turn them down, I couldn't sleep for 3 or 4 days. And at that point, I knew, I hadn't made the right decision. And so I went back to GE, asked if I could, accept the job after having turned it down, and they fortunately agreed. And then with Northwestern Bell, I went back and obviously, declined it. And the rest was history, so to speak.
So we've kind of talked about, coming out of school, going to Japan. I think you did a.
I was at Nanzan University in Nagoya, Japan, yes, for 2 years, during college.
Then you come back and you've had a storied career at some really big name companies. So let's talk more about your current role at Sharp. So what exactly are you doing in your current role, and just tell us about it.
Yeah, so as you said in the introduction, I'm in charge of the consumer products group for Sharp, and we have there's really kind of 3 areas that I have responsibility for. So we have a manufacturing facility in Memphis, Tennessee. Actually, it's Sharp's first and obviously oldest manufacturing facility outside of Japan. It opened up in 1979, and it's there in Memphis, where we today make premium, primarily cooking products for the Sharp brand, but we also have more than a dozen OEM brands that we build cooking products for as well. So that's one aspect of the role. The second aspect is the sales and marketing for our consumer products or home appliance products. That's based out of Montvale, New Jersey, which is actually where my office is based. And then the third part is the service organization. So the national service organization that services customers' products. We also provide support for dealers for training and repair parts. So really, it's a soup to nuts role that I have around manufacturing, sales and marketing, and customer service.
And I know that early in as I recall, your boss left unexpectedly and surprisingly, and you ended up taking the interim role that you then, of course, now you have permanently. And I think this was early in that process was a downturn, and you have a story that I think when I heard you tell the story, the first thing that I thought of was there's this saying about people don't always remember what you say, but they remember how you made them feel. And I thought that was such a great, the way you tell that story about the downsizing that had to go on and the way you treated it, I think is really important lesson for folks.
Yeah, so let me give you a little bit of background. So I joined Sharp in 2011, December of 2011. And I came into the organization in charge of product marketing for television products. And it was kind of midway through the time in which Sharp was really leading the industry in introducing large screen televisions. I mean, at that time, 60-inch was considered an extra large television. And from there, we successfully introduced 70-inch and 80-inch and ultimately 90-inch televisions. But it became a very competitive marketplace, especially when you had the giants of the industry like Samsung and others join in the battle for market share in large screen televisions. And so it was in 2015 when we made a corporate decision to get out of the direct marketing and manufacturing of televisions for the U.S. market. We still had television products for other geographies around the world like Japan and Asia and Europe, but we decided because it was just such a brutal price competitive business in the United States that we would withdraw from that. And so at that time in 2015, it was also the time that my boss, who was president of the sales and marketing operation, that he left Sharp and went to another opportunity, coincidentally at Samsung, managing their home appliance business. And so I was given the interim role for 2 months to replace him. And ultimately, through a series of internal interviews, and they looked outside, I was given the permanent nod back in beginning of 2016. And it was at that time that, again, we had to go through the restructuring of taking, what was a 100 or so person organization in which, 3/4 of the revenue was television based. And I had to make, the very difficult decision to downsize the organization. So, we went from, nearly 100 people down to about 25. And, I'm so proud of the way that we handled it. And I was given a lot of, really good resources from human resources. So there were good transition packages, because, we were letting people go from a job that they had been with us for 5, 10, 15, 20, even more years than that. And they weren't losing their job because they were poor performers, but they were losing their jobs because the market had changed. And as a company, we had failed, at that time to really kind of keep up. And so, we were, I think we treated people very, very well with dignity and respect. And, one thing that I'm really proud of the approach that we took is that I was in every single, sit down discussion that we had with the 75 people. And it took place over 2 to 3 different periods within a 6-month time period. But in every single one of the one-on-one discussions with the impacted employee, I was there in that conversation. Because regardless of whether they were somebody that reported to me or they were 2 levels down from me, I wanted them to, see the whites of my eyes and hear, my explanation of why we were making this change. And unfortunately, the fact that their position was impacted. So, we really treated people with dignity and respect. And I think the payoff, is that, as we refocused our business to kitchen appliances, that, we've grown that business and we've added staff back into the organization. And I have a number of people that were impacted from the television layoffs that have come back to Sharp because they remember well how well they were treated by Sharp. And so when an opportunity arose to come and rejoin Sharp in a different capacity in the kitchen appliance business, they wanted to join us. And so I'm just really proud of that.
I think it speaks volumes when people come back That's amazing. That really says that, like you said, you handled it well. The job was done well, and they felt so. Even though nobody wants to lose their job, they felt so good about the way it was done that they wanted to come back and be a part of as you said earlier, kind of the family feel of what Sharp offers. I think that's phenomenal. I didn't know y'all got out of the TV business, by the way. I still have a Sharp Aquos on my wall that's probably predates my 15-year-old son, and it's still going strong.
Yeah, well, we have aspirations to re-enter the market. Actually, we're working. That's an initiative we're on right now, is to get back into the television market. So stay tuned on that subject.
Well, apparently I don't ever need a new one. It's lasting all this time. So.
That's good to hear.
You said there's nothing more constant than change in the CE industry, and that you've been proud to play a part in some of the advancements. What practices do you have in place to ensure that Sharp is constantly innovating?
Yeah, so that phrase about there's nothing more constant than change in CE industries, because particularly in TV, product life cycles are a year. I mean, every year you're turning over product. Now it's a little bit longer. It's a longer elongated product cycle in the kitchen appliance business, but yes, you have to be constantly on kind of the leading edge of change, or you'll get left behind. So, for me, how do we stay in front of things? Well, it's really about going to things like trade shows, so there's the Kitchen and Bath Show, which just took place at the end of January, where one can go and you can see what competitors are launching into the marketplace. And it can spark some ideas in terms of new product configurations that you can bring to market. It's also about, I have weekly calls with the sales teams where, I ask them to share about what are they hearing from their accounts? What are their dealers saying to our salespeople about, hey, have you looked at this type of product idea, or this type of competitive product is doing really well in the marketplace? Is that something that you can come out with in the future, and could you even make improvements on what exists in the marketplace today? And then it's staying abreast of technology trends, whether that be like research reports. It's also going out into retail stores and having one-on-one discussions with salespeople, and taking a look about what's on display. So it's kind of those things that ensures that we stay ahead of trends that are happening in the marketplace.
Well, to see how far behind I was, like I said, I have the Sharp Aquos TV, and I have a Sharp carousel microwave, and did not even realize how much y'all had progressed into the home appliances. So you mentioned the 2023 Kitchen and Bath Industry Show that just finished up at the end of January. Mm-hmm. And I was reading that article about that, and you have like new slide-in ranges and combi appliances. So how have you transitioned from being, maybe at least in my mind, no more from microwaves to being really full service suite of home products?
Yeah. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, when we exited the television business, it really allowed us to focus singularly on the kitchen appliance business. And, up until, call it, 2017, 2018, we were primarily, I'll say a microwave oven based technology brand. So our signature product, since the mid 2000s, 2005, has been our microwave drawer, which was a product that was, conceived in our Memphis facility. And so being singularly focused on appliances, I felt that it was necessary to expand beyond primarily being known for cooking products. And so what we did is we set up I set up a sourcing product team. And the sourcing product team was charged with going out into the marketplace and primarily looking at third-party suppliers that were offshore, so primarily in Asia, but also a little bit in Europe. And so we kind of set up this, I'll call it 10 to 15 year plan, which was set up in 3 different phases. Phase 1 was what I defined as time to market. So, it would be a very expensive proposition for Sharp to start up a refrigerator factory or a dishwasher factory or a wall oven factory or even sliding ranges for that matter. And so this sourcing team was really charged with looking at companies that were offshore that could bring very high quality products to market. And we would enlist the support of our Japanese-based colleagues who, have expertise in terms of ensuring that the overseas factories, meet Sharp's standard for quality and for safety. And also ensuring that the products, kind of the off-the-shelf products that they have, that they meet the Sharp standards. And so, working with these third-party manufacturers, we would add things such as what we call the Sharp visual brand language, whether that be matching handles across any appliance, or whether it be kind of an edge-to-edge black glass look, which is applicable to a number of different major built-in kitchen products. And so that was kind of phase one, which is time to market. How do we quickly get to market with an entire kitchen suite of products that extends beyond microwave ovens? And we've successfully done that. So we have, since that time, we've launched refrigerators and dishwashers and wall ovens. We've also introduced cooktops. We have range hoods, and we have slide-in ranges, which will be coming out in the course of the next couple months. So that was phase one. So I kind of consider that as completed at this point. And again, that's been a 3 to 4 year initiative. Phase two is what I call kind of time to innovation. And that's where, we're in the process of still building out our distribution. We're still in the process of building out our volume. But what we want to do is we want to these third party manufactured products under the Sharp brand, we want to add Sharp specific technologies. And this is what will truly differentiate us in the marketplace. So adding specific Sharp technologies to our refrigerators, to our dishwashers, wall ovens, ranges, etc. And so that's that's a phase that we're in earnest right now, which we're doing. And then, this is going to take a few years, but then the third phase, which is kind of where we ultimately want to get to, which would be, call it the back half of this decade, is what I call time to volume. And this is where we've solidified our sales in the marketplace. We've solidified our channels of distribution, and we have sufficient levels of volume to where we can consider bringing some of these products that we've outsourced up until now, but we can bring those in-house. And then, I'll just give an example of one product that was kind of early in that phase. So we initially sourced, for example, Induction cooktops. And in the last year, we've kind of gone through that phase one, that phase two aspect of it, and now we're building Induction cooktops in our Memphis facility. And so I think that's a good example of this kind of phase one, phase two, phase three methodology that we're following for our kitchen appliance business.
Induction is interesting to me because I know that I didn't know much about it other than obviously now there's a buzz around the problem with gas, and my wife's a dedicated gas user. So yep. We're redoing our kitchen. I'm trying to convince her to go the induction route. And just from an engineering perspective, it's, I think, 90% efficient. It's the most efficient product, way of cooking out there. So do you see induction really growing in the marketplace?
I do. The U.S. is actually behind other geographies in the world with the adoption of induction. I mean, induction it's new technology. And, there's a Bloomberg magazine, I think it's a cover story, in fact, that is talking about this topic. Because you're right, this has been in the press. There's been some press recently about, how gas ranges can actually introduce, contaminants, I'll say, into the home. And so Bloomberg magazine has done a cover story on it. And in this article, they talk about how in Europe, only 3% of households now, or I should say 3% of unit sales are of gas products, and everything else has switched over to electric and primarily induction. I mean, obviously there's radiant cooktop or electric cooktops, but mostly it's moved to induction. And even in Canada, induction has become quite popular these days. So I think it's a matter of when, not if, induction becomes popular here in the United States. And to what you were saying a minute ago, induction combines the best of gas and electric cooking. So from a comparison versus electric, it's very easy to clean, because unlike a radiant cooktop that you can get because the glass is heating up with a radiant cooktop, if anything spills over from your pot, it's very difficult to clean. But with induction, you're only heating the pan, and your hand can actually touch the cooktop, and you won't get burned. So there's safety to it. It's easy to cook and or easy to clean, that is. And then with regards to gas, gas has that kind of that visual appeal to people. They call it the UX factor. But if you want to boil water, you can boil water nearly twice as fast with an induction cooktop, because you're using magnetic energy that only heats the pan itself, and you can boil water twice as fast as you can with gas. And what's also nice is the precise temperature control that you can get with induction that you can't get with gas, and you can't even get as precise control with electric as well. So really, just all around, induction is clearly the way to go for the future.
Well, that concludes part one of my conversation with Jim Sanduski, president of Sharp Home Electronics Company of America. Coming up in part two, Jim talks about his preference for an open office design and why he feels it makes him a more effective leader.
You look at our office facility; it's a completely open style. So I'm in a corner. I have a corner office location, but there's no walls, there's no doors, and everyone has that type of open office environment, and that really just fosters good communication. And it's also, again, this family style culture that I talk about with Sharp, where we treat everybody with dignity and respect. And whether I encourage people that are 2 or 3 levels down from me to talk to me, right? To come up and say hello, and I make a point of, when I see them, to say hello, as I pass them. So you really want to treat people well up and down the organization, just like you would want to be treated.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.